Alright, welcome back for another replay cast. This time I'm going to be playing as the Dwarfs, and these guys are sitting at a humble 33% on the leaderboard on the Total Tavern website. I guess with the new update, their performance has gone down a little bit. I'm not sure what changed it. I don't know enough about the meta and the unit stats and how they've been adjusted. For why that's the case, it could be the players that are using them in the tournaments and whatnot, but either way, I figured it'd be a fun faction to get a handle on. So coming in with Thorgrim Grudgebearer as my lord. I've got Longbeards on the side with standard variants and great weapons backed up by some slayers. And then on my right, from this perspective, my left flank, I've got two squads of Dwarf Warriors, two squads of Dwarf Warriors with great weapons and more slayers. My opponent is going to be playing as Grand Cathay. And let's see, so they've got a dragon-blooded Lord of Yin. They've got a lot of cannons. Looks like, is that 4 squads of great cannons? 4 squads of great cannons, 3 squads of crane gunners, and some peasant long spears. So, a lot of artillery from my opponent coming in. And I'm going to be going for points 2 and 1. I figured I wanted to go with points that are near each other, given the mobility issues that the dwarves deal with. You're going to start seeing some shooting on the approach. And the way I have this set up is that I'm trying to get troops outside of the line of sight of all these artillery. So I'm trying to get behind, like on the point, but behind the ridge so they don't have as good of an angle of fire. You can see this crane gunner over here set up in a good position. But I really don't have the type of tools that you would want to deal with this kind of start. I don't have anything to rush over there with. So instead what I'm doing is just trying to get on the points, try to minimize losses, and play with the angles for the shooting that they've got. Longbeards with great weapons going into the woods. Dwarf Warriors getting shot down over here. Dwarf Warriors with great weapons hiding on the behind these kind of mounds. More Longbeards with great weapons back in the woods. They've got a Lord coming over here. Maybe going to be casting some magic. Organ Guns coming in support with some more Dwarf Warriors. I want to make sure I'm maintaining capture weight. See, my opponent's got some Jade Warriors on the way, so I figured I'd bring in Organ Guns and shoot at whatever infantry they start bringing into point 2 for capture weight. Crane Gunners still doing a lot of work on my Longbeards over here. Their Lord is diving in, getting some combat against them. Looks like they got two squads of my Longbeards getting chased off. Point 3 is at the time uncontested. So Spearmen are still sitting back there. I guess they were keeping them in case I had some kind of gyrocopter or airplay. And you can see my opponent's accruing a pretty good amount of value just shooting down my troops while I'm on the approach. They got Jade Warriors on point 2, Organ Guns shooting in to deal with them. And their Lord is kind of just hovering around seeing what goes on. So Longbeards with great weapons moving on to point 1. More Dwarf Warriors coming in. They're going to sit back in the woods and reinforce when they're needed. Thunder is coming in as well. I figured the Thunders would be a good way to deal with their Lord if he kept flying around in my area. So a lot of Jade Warriors coming in. 2 over on point 1. 1 sitting on point 2, but he doesn't have enough capture weight for it to be a problem. These guys probably could be sitting elsewhere. I probably could have thrown them in and jumped on these Jade Warriors, but I figured I'd let the Organ Guns do some work. So again, I mean, the damage value is just, you know, coming from all the artillery they've got. Thunder starting to shoot at the Dragon-Blooded Lord of Yin. Let's see what spells he brought. He brought... That's an ability. So, Summon Ancestral Warriors and Talons of the Night. So he's got a big Vortex and he's got a unit summon. Longbeards with great weapons have been chased off. Dwarf Warriors running in to deal with some Jade Warriors. My Dwarf Warriors on point 2 have collapsed on their Jade Warriors, and Organ Guns getting some decent shots off. These great weapon troops probably could have gotten used earlier. I was afraid to send my lord in because of all the firing that they had. I figured the crane gunners would probably deal with him pretty quickly. Dragon Blooded Lord coming over and he's dropping the Talons of the Night on my organ guns. Maybe not the best use of that. It's going to disrupt the shooting for some time, but not a lot of damage getting done, given the limited amount of units and how loosely they're dispersed on here. I mean, the area of effect probably caught all the guys here, but I think that's probably a spell meant to be used on a pack of elite infantry. So, Longbears with great weapons coming in from the wooded area here to fight against the Jade Warriors, get some good armor piercing value, which my standard Dwarf Warriors did not have. A lot of units fleeing. My Thunders, looks like, I'm not sure if my Thunders got dealt with or if I relocated them. Where are they at? Okay, so I moved them around this way. Although I'm not sure if this is a fresh summon. What happened with the other squad? A lot of stuff going on here. It's a little hard for me to keep track of stuff. So, Dwarf Warriors with great weapons moving in from both sides. Got Thorgrim on the way. He is going to be a little bit of a big target, so I have to keep an eye on him and how exposed I get him to the shooting of my opponent. Again, they got crane gunners and great cannons. That's mostly what they've got in the backfield. Point one, probably a lost cause at this point. They've got two squads of crane gunners and some great cannons backing up Jade Warriors, and I don't have the amount of troops over here to deal with that. So what I did instead was I ended up bringing another squad of Dwarf Warriors with great weapons and putting them on point 3 because he was not playing that. And I've got Thunder shooting at these Ancestral Warriors and Hammers coming in as well. This was a summon that they put on top of my organ gun and chased them off. Thorgrim got shot down pretty quickly by those crane gunners, so my opponent was doing a good job of paying attention to where my lord was and prioritizing targets. You can see they're probably, I'm assuming he has an attack command still issued on him, so they're trying to move forward and get an angle on him. But we'll see if he catches that. Thunders have done some good damage to the Dragon Blooded Lord, so he's sitting about probably 60% health or so. And yeah, Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, Longbears with great weapons, doing pretty good against the Jade Warriors in here. Unfortunately, I can't get my lord to add much support, but he's going to be looping around. You can barely see there's a faint trail of a command that I'm giving for him to go back and around. I didn't want him to go straight across or this way because of the crane gunners over here. They do have crane gunners on this side as well, but Thorgrim's going to be traveling through the woods, so if they shoot at him, some of those shots might get blocked by the trees. Slayer's still sitting over here. Probably want to move them out of that situation given that I kind of gave up on point 1. My opponent does have control over point 2, although I have a slight point lead, given I had control over that for most of the match, as well as this until recently. And now I'm relocating my troops to control points 3 and then to push on 2. So my hammer is on the way. The Ancestral Warriors kind of faded away before the combat was fully over between them and the hammers and whoever else I had back there. More Quarrelers and Longbears on the way. Their lord's kind of just sitting there floating around, looking for the next target. He's been pretty conservative with him, which is playing out well for him, given he's letting his cannons and his crane gunners do most of the work. So yeah, again, you can see he's still got four great cannons back there, 4 crane gunners, and I really have not been able to threaten that. They destroyed so many of my troops on the approach. You can see even my Quarrelers on the way are getting shoot up this squad as well. Slayer's getting shot down on their way towards the middle. Thorgrim's making his way around, luckily able to avoid taking much more damage. And now I'm going to start trying to put some pressure on the back line. So I got Slayers because they're one of my quicker units getting back here. They don't have too many infantry or hand-to-hand troops over here to defend them. Dwarf Warriors with great weapons moving this way as well. Going to be following this channel into the back to deal with them. And then also Longbears coming in here to get some more capture weight on point 2. So at this point, I'm realizing my opponent's going to be catching up to me on victory points. I know that I'm basically forfeiting the gold value at this point. I know that I'm not going to be able to, with my build, get on top of his artillery too well. And so what I'm trying to do is just play it smart, avoid the line of fire of the artillery the best I can, and then get capture weight on the points that I need. Make sure that he's not able to take point 3 back from me now that I've got that in my control. So Quarrelers firing in. Prioritizing the Jade Warriors. They do have shields and decent armor, so the Quarrelers are not going to deal a lot of damage to them. If I could have gotten a great weapon variant of, say, like Rangers or something like that, that might have been better, but I'm not sure about that. It also would provide a valuable target for the Great Cannons and the Crane Gunners, so it was an interesting matchup, trying to figure out what your roster is going to be. Both factions have the potential to have a lot of artillery and ranged fire, doing a whole bunch of damage, but either way, Hammer is in here, Longbeard is in here, with great weapons and without. Another squad of Longbeards over here dealing with the Jade Warriors. I figured this is a good situation for me to send Thorgrim into, because there's no line of sight for their firing over here. You see my Slayers got dealt with, but they were able to fight off one of the squads of Crane Gunners. Dwarf Warriors with great weapons fighting the Jade Warriors with halberds. Got some Thunders over here getting some shots off as well, shooting over and working on the great Grand Cannon crew. So the damage value gap is still pretty great. You can see my opponent's got a lot of supplies left, so he really has his pick of the litter as far as what troops he wants to bring in. His units remaining is really high, so he's got a lot of troops on the field. Most of them are pretty healthy, but I'm still competing on the victory points. Thorgrim's got his way in here. I'm starting to win the infantry battle in here, somewhat with the assistance of my lord. I do have superior infantry anyways. The Longbeards are really going to be, excuse me, the Hammers are really going to be doing a lot of work on this center point. And their lord is still flying around, kind of just seeing what's out there. My organ guns that I brought back up are getting jumped on by his Ancestral Warrior Summon. I sent Gotrek to deal with them because these guys are ethereal, so they do have 55% physical resistance. And Gotrek was the only troop that I had because my hammers were over here that had magic damage. So I ran him in. I'm not sure if that was a waste of a summon. I probably could have just sacked those organ guns because Gotrek realistically wasn't going to have the damage output against an infantry unit to chase them off before the organ guns were done. You can see they kind of got, what do you call it, their unbinding finished up, so they're off the field now. But my organ gun's taken care of, so you know his lord did what he meant to do with that. That was his second use of the Ancestral Spirits, or whatever that ability, Ancestral Warriors, so he can't summon them anymore, but he took out my organ gun twice with them, so he was using that very well, keeping it in his back pocket and not just throwing it down because he had it off a cooldown. Being patient with spells and whatnot is really helpful in this game. Sometimes you'll see a blob of troops and just want to use a vortex spell just because, but sometimes you have a bunch of really cheap troops and you're not getting good value for the spell. So if this guy had a bunch of peasants lined up, it might look like a good area for me to use a vortex spell if I was a magic casting faction. The dwarves don't have magic, but you see what I mean. Thorgrim going down there to the artillery fire. That was my fault, not keeping him out of line of sight or out of range. But yeah, like I was saying, if you have a bunch of cheap infantry that you can use a vortex spell on, sometimes that's a good move to maybe in a situation where you're trying to maintain capture weight or prevent an enemy from swinging something in their favor. But as far as value goes, you might want to save it for an elite troop or for a situation where you've got some like elite cavalry trapped up or sandwiched. So just something to keep in mind. Kind of another good reminder for me to do the same when I'm playing as a casting faction. And you can even apply the same logic with the runes that the dwarves use. Or the dwarfs, however you're supposed to pronounce it. I think that in the Warhammer world they spell it with the F at the end instead of a V for plural. So my opponent's getting some Jade Warriors with halberds on point 3. That's not good for me. So I got Dwarf Warriors on the way to deal with them. Dragon Blood Allure still flying around, just trying to wreak havoc in my backfield. Again, they've got the Talons of the Night, so they can wait for my shooting to stop, as they did with my organ guns, and drop that spell on them. Gotrek in here, fighting against some Jade Warriors. Not the best situation for me, but my opponent doesn't really have any large targets for me. And at this point, with Thorgrim dead, it's going to be really hard for me to deal with this, so you can see how far ahead my opponent is in damage value, and anything that I kill off, he's just going to be able to re-summon. So although the victory points are still somewhat close, and I have a decent amount of troops on the field, this game is over. I'm going to end up losing this. and it ends up actually being somewhat close towards the end, but I don't know. I just felt like the second half of this replay, there's not too much going on outside of just blob fights and me scrambling with all my low-cost troops, just trying to get stuff on the field. I didn't realize he had so much supplies left, but it would only make sense given the difference in damage dealt. So I'm able to hold on to this for some time. You can see I'm throwing my Quarrelers on here, just trying to get some more capture weight to slow them down. But they've got more models. They've got Jade Warriors, Halberds, 2 squads of them on there. They've got some Jade Warriors with crossbows that they can run over in case they need more capture weight. And I conceded because I saw what was going on. So anyways, well played to my opponent. I'm wondering what you're supposed to do against the artillery play of Cathay if you're playing as the Dwarfs. I'm assuming that your only option is really to get a lot of air troops and use gyrocopters or something like that, but I also suspect they might just get shot down, and they're decently high value units if I recall correctly. So something I'll have to look into. Let's take a look at the unit stats. So Thorgrim didn't get almost anything done. Slayers did alright. Longbeards got, with great weapons, got smashed. Standard Longbeards didn't do great. Really none of my troops got their value. Gautric included, Hammers included. Thunders did okay. Thunders were probably one of my better performing units, which they didn't do great, so it's not saying too much. But for my opponent, I mean, look at this. This is pretty interesting. I want to say it's a ridiculous build, but for the map and for the opponent, me being the opponent in this situation for my enemy here, it makes sense, I guess, using a ton of artillery like this because, you know, I actually looked at the stats for my cannons as dwarfs, and none of my units have range like these grand cannons do. So unless I knew what he was bringing, it would be really hard for me to counter this. Again, crane guns getting a ton of damage in. Grand cannons getting a ton of damage in. Their lord did alright. I think this is not a full reflection of the amount of work that she did because of the ancestral warriors. You can see another crane gunner. And nothing crazy on any of their infantry. Actually, that's decent on their crossbowmen, but yeah, just a ton of damage output from their artillery and their crane gunners. So what played to my opponent? This is gonna be my first matchup as the Dwarfs, and I'll do 4 more after this, just to learn them better. There's gonna be matches. In case you're new to watching these, I'm usually only gonna be posting the matches that are somewhat closer or somewhat more interesting. If there's a match that's just a complete wash and I didn't feel like I learned anything from it or it wouldn't be good for the viewer experience, I'm not gonna post it. But what I'm doing is posting 5 matches of each race so I can go around and kind of just get a basic understanding of how they work. And I play more matches than that as them. I usually end up playing around like, I don't know, 10 to 15 or so. But 5 will get posted and just get a good sense of what all the factions are about and which ones I want to dedicate myself to some more going forward. So anyways, thanks for watching. Well played to my opponent, and I'll see you on the next one.